Mr. Isikeli Tikondundua, the Chair of Suva City Council and Lemi Town Council, Mr. Adish Naidu, Chair of Nendi and Singotoka Town Council, members of professional bodies and institutes, senior government officials, young planners from USP and FNU, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. On World Town Planning Day, let me acknowledge the significance of this day and thank all planners for their contribution towards the work they do in planning towns, cities, and rural areas. The World Town Planning Day is celebrated on 8th November every year, which was yesterday, and I did send my message to all the planners through a tweet message. And the reason why I did that, because I value good planners. And I was really blown away when I came to know that 2020 is the 71st anniversary of World Town Planning Day, which is remarkable. But unfortunately, we have not been putting a lot of emphasis on the importance of planning and the important role planners play in developing or creating a livable human settlements or in creating towns and cities in which we live. That is missing. Although this day, World Town Planning Day, started in 1949. But if you look at the international order, which was evolving at that time, it's quite interesting to see that United Nations was founded in 1945, Commonwealth in 1949, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948. So you can imagine around that time, World Town Planning Day was set aside to recognize the importance of planning during that era where democracy and human rights took a center stage. And the thinking was that we need to plan our towns better so that we don't end up creating shanty towns. Right, so World Town Planning Day is not something that was created yesterday or day before. It has been there for so long, and it really plays an important role. And I want to emphasize again that, as a town planner, I would be urging more people to take up this profession in town planning. It's a wonderful profession. I mean, you basically, when it comes to planning towns and cities, there's so many challenges that you need to take into consideration. And these challenges ranges from unsustainable development to climate change and to many other factors. But the question is, how are you going to incorporate all that in your plans? And now we've got other challenges which is looming, which is how planners will now consider COVID-19 in their plans when they're planning their towns and cities. How are you going to consider crime prevention in your environmental design? These are some of the things that you need to consider as more issues emerge, because planning is something that we look towards finding solutions to some of these challenges that I have just stated. I know there are many developers, sometimes they get quite frustrated with my ministry, particularly Department of Town and Country Planning, and their frustration is well understood. They're expecting efficiency, they're expecting things to move faster. But how can Department of Town and Country Planning, by using the archaic laws, provide that level of expectation that new planners come up with? Because they study abroad, they come back to the country, and what do they find? they find old legislation still guiding planning in Fiji. And the two pieces of legislation, Town and Country Planning Act, which is 74 years old, Subdivision Act, which is 83 years old. They're very old pieces of legislation. And it's no longer serving the interest of developers. And we have to change this legislation. I know some attempts were made in 1978, and that's when some changes were made. After that, the changes, the thinking was there to, bring about major change in the law. Some work started, but it did not complete. But we are very determined this time around to complete this piece of work, and that's been taken over by Maria Umbitau, the former Director of Town and Country Planning. Now, to review this legislation, what we are looking forward to is to understand the planning principles as well as the various planning guidelines, as well as the various laws that are available globally. And we want to understand what are these modern way of or modern legislation available which meets our needs. A desktop study was undertaken, and we have looked at the various new provisions that can be included or adapted to Fiji's situation. The consultation started way back, and I'm very pleased that tomorrow we will be meeting the former directors with the new planners. So it will be a forum where we meet, or we have two groups of people, the former directors with new, young, vibrant planners in one room to review this legislation. So there's going to be an interesting mix of ideas that we would like to see. And once that exercise is over, then we will be in a position to submit the draft law to SG's office for drafting and for that legislation to be presented in the parliament, etc. But from our perspective, the work on this particular legislation will complete after our consultation. My ministry is also reviewing the general provisions to make it relevant, because the development trends in Fiji have evolved over time. Unfortunately, our planning and development guidelines can no longer support new thinking in planning, which can be addressed by technologies. Therefore, there is a need to ensure that there is increased flexibility to accommodate high-density development, which can, with an emphasis on updating plot ratio requirements, setbacks, and minimum lot sizes. This is where, in my view, when the rules are not very clear, it leads to corruption. We have seen public arguing with Ministry of Local Government, and particularly with Town and Country Planning, why my neighbor can build their houses just 2 meters or 1 meter away from the road, whereas I have to comply with 3-meter requirement and so forth. So this argument continues, and it is very subjective or decision making at the moment. So we want to relook at all these provisions and make it more user friendly. Besides the legislation, my ministry is also embarking on the review of outdated town schemes with municipal councils to make it current. This will reduce the number of rezoning applications we receive. This will begin with the Suva City Council, Lautoka City Council, and Levuka Town Council. We will also prepare the advisory plan for Navua. I was in Navua a month ago, and there is a need to relook at Navua, looking at the growth within Navua town. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to talk about the Singapore Corporation Enterprises work on master planning for the Greater Suva area, Nandi Lautoka. And this work will be completed in mid-2021. It will add significantly to the strategic planning that is needed to successfully plan for future generations. The master plans we are developing will emphasize greater certainty in commercial zoning, the building of ring roads around around our cities to move heavy traffic from inner urban roads, and decentralization so that transport hubs and community infrastructure are placed throughout the suburbs, thus decreasing the travel distances for Fijians as they live, work, and play. Finally, the ministry is working on the new town development program as well, and the two areas that my ministry is focusing is Nambowalu and Korovo. There's a lot of potential for both these places. Some work has started for Nambowalu. In fact, the civil work has started in Nambowalu, and we are planning to put up a passenger terminal at the Nambowalu jetty for the passengers who frequently travel by ships and boats. So we have to put some some facilities for the traveling passengers, and I'm glad that the government has given us some money during this budget for this financial year, and we will be using that funds to progress the work. One thing I've realized that planning takes a lot of time. The approval processes, even when you hire architects, the time they spend, and I do realize the importance of planning, because if you plan better initially, then when it comes to construction stage, it moves faster. It's much clearer once you have gone through the planning phase. I've seen cases where people have rushed into plans, and then later on there's a lot of variations, because as things start, then you say, okay, I'm not very happy with this idea or that idea, and you want to change them, and that results in variation cost. So we want to avoid all that. Our planning started last year, but this is only the drawings, the basic concept that we wanted to put. But we are yet to hire the consultants to draw the plans for the passenger terminal in Nambowalu. So, ladies and gentlemen, to mark the day, my ministry has designed a professional development forum. I hope you will enjoy the session and apply what you learn in your planning process. And I will make sure that November 8th is recognized every year in Fiji, and we're going to dedicate November 8th to our planners in Fiji for the great work they've been doing over the years. So I also once again want to say thank you, planners, for the great work you have been doing. And with these words, it gives me much pleasure to officially declare today's World Town Planning Day event open. Vinaka. Thank you.